things we need to do is we need to make sure Flow Designer is communicating with our server, and you put your Salesforce details in here. That's where it tells the system your Salesforce account that you're working with.
Testing.
Hello? Okay. Basically, the designer needs this information to make sure it's communicating correctly with your Salesforce org. But the flow is by no means tied to that org. So it's not like if you give a flow and if you have a flow and you put it in a different org, that's fine. Flows can be used in different orgs, but it does need to have whatever dependencies that flow has in the data model or in Apex. That those things need to go over also. So you need to make sure you manage that. We don't currently support packaging. So if you do distribute flows yet, you actually need to give out the file currently. We were hoping to get packaging in. We didn't get it in, unfortunately, so that was a shame. Okay, so we've got the account details in here for the actual linking to our Salesforce account. Now let's build out the quote itself. So I'm going to start by saying, okay, so for the lead deduplication, first thing I want to do for us to help identify a lead is we need to know that maybe, in this case, the last name and the postal code. That will help us work out, who the lead is. So I'm going to create a form here, and I'm going to call it, lead. In here, please provide the following. Is this a bit at the top? And then I'm going to add a couple of questions here. So I'm going to add, I'm going to call it the search last name. And the question, think of the question as a lot of background noise on the phone if somebody's and the prompt is basically the label that you often see in Salesforce. I'm going to call its last name. Okay, and that it's going to be text that we want the user to enter. So that's my first question I'm going to add. And then the next question I'm going to ask is the postcode. And again, it's a field. The user can provide some input, and the label for them will be postal code so they can see it. And that's our first form. Let me show you what that looks like, just so we can actually see it. That's what the user will see: last name, postal code. That's the first part of our process. And now, based on that information, I want to actually go away to Salesforce and find a lead that matches that information. So let's do that now. So once we get that information, we're going to want to grab maybe some additional information about the lead. Like we might want to know their email address, or we might want to know just get the lead ID, just so we've got that and we can use that laterally in the system. So I'm going to create a new variable, and we'll come back to that in a sec. Lead ID. And I'm just going to very quickly tick this box for expose it, and I'll come back to why I've done that. Okay, so next thing is we want to, so once we've got the lead information, we now want to give the user a list of, leads that match, basically. That's part of the lead dedupe exercise. So I'm going to create another question. I'm just going to, in this case, create a question. I'm going to call it lead results. Please select. And in this case, I'm going to create something called a choice lookup, which lets us get data from Salesforce and represent it back to the user. In order to get data from Salesforce, I need to basically create a data source, which basically allows me to collect information from Salesforce and sort of query it. So think about the leads, these data sources as like mapping an object to your process. So that sounds really technical. It's basically saying we want to have this table available in our business process. In this case, the table is an object, which is the leads. So as I go through this wizard to set up the data source, I have all my entire Salesforce org available. So I can use any object to get the information. In this case, we want to get it from the leads object, so I'll just select that one. And you can see that now that I've created this data source, it's got all my fields that are in my lead object. They're all here now. And that's basically it. The data source is just saying I want to be able to link to the leads object. That's all it does. I want to link to the leads object and to source my data. And now I can use that source to say, well, now let's do a lookup. Let's get the data from the leads list and present it to the user. So leads list. So I'm going to use my lead source. I'm going to show the user the full name as being the thing that they're going to see in the list that they view. I'm going to create a filter to say that I only want the leads where the name contains whatever we typed in for the search last name. That seems reasonable. So it just has to contain whatever we typed into that box. And then I also want the list to basically match the postal code. So basically I want the postal code to be equal to whatever we put in for the search postal code. So now we have two filters. One is that the name must be equal to whatever we typed into the search last name, or sorry, it must contain whatever we typed in for search last name, and it must equal the postal code. We could have used contain again. I'm just using equal. And then based on that, whatever the user selects, I want to grab the lead ID because I'm going to use that later on, and I'm going to plunk it into our little lead ID variable. So if you like, the weird thing that may be quite foreign for those of you, if you're non-technical on the call right now, you're probably thinking, wow, this seems quite technical. Don't worry, I'm taking you into like the 401 course, if you like, on this. So, but is that basically, but the takeaway is that we sit above the object model. So the flow itself is not tied in any way to the lead. We kind of have to go away to the leads object, filter the one to find the one we want, grab the data we want from it, and put it into our flow so we can use it. We're not tied directly to a record or to an object. So we're going to just link these things together and say that after we've got the lead search result, we'll then get our list of results and show them to the user. And if none are presented, we'll just do a not found option to say nothing found. So let's run this just to show you what it looks like so you can kind of see what this looks like from an end user perspective. So run. I'm going to put in Wood, the postal code of 94105. And next. And the designer is allowing me to simulate directly here what I would see. So you can actually see, whoa, there's a whole bunch of things here that actually are in the system. And also our nothing found option, which isn't ordered quite correctly. But you can see we've got the options are listed for the user. And these are coming directly from Salesforce. So if we went back and said, in this case, Steel, next, nothing found. So there's nobody in there with that name. So we could go down the nothing found option, and maybe we'd have a thing that said, oh, maybe we'd have like another form that allowed us to insert more lead information, complete the rest of the lead detail, and then come back into the process. So I'm going to just basically put a little marker here just to sort of say, I'll put to complete. Just for this path. Okay, so once the user selects the lead, we actually grab the lead ID and then we've got it and we can then use it. So effectively I'm going to say that basically our lead dedupe bit is done. So I'm going to get rid of that on there and just to say we've now finished that, and we'll smooth this down a little bit. So the next bit we sort of said was once we've got the lead and we've deduped them, we would then go into collect the quote information. So one of the things I didn't do before, but I might do now, is I could actually convert this directly and say, we'll just convert it to a question, because I now know that maybe it should be a question. Or I could even convert it into a form. And in this case, it is actually a form. So I'm going to convert this to a form. And then here, I'm going to call this quote, mortgage quote. So given that I know the mortgage quotation process well, I know that basically what we need in order for the quote is the first thing we need is to get the amount. So what is the mortgage amount basically? And that is a currency. So that's our field. We want to add another question, which is basically term, the number of years. So again, user provides response, so let me put years. In that case, that's the number. So we need that information in order to create our quote. We simply need the amount and the term, and then we can create the whole from that. So please enter the following. Okay. And now we can just link that form up. So you can see we're slowly building out the business process here. We've kind of got the lead details. We went off and searched to find some leads that are matched, and then we're going to give this lead quote, which is basically collecting the information about the amount and the term. And then we need to generate the quote. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And then after we go to generate the quote, we're going to email the quote. Well, thankfully, we've actually got an element here which lets us basically send an email directly to the user. So I'm going to actually, we don't have an ability to directly convert to that type of element. So I'm going to delete and then this element here. And this one lets us now email the customer. So I'm going to email quote. And in here, I can just set to send an email. And then there's some parameters here that I can provide in order to email that quote out. So I can sort of say, well, again, I'm giving you a very whistle-stop tour here. So I can put in things like, sorry, my screen just went really weird. And I can basically just say, well, actually, the record is that lead ID. And the other things I don't really need to provide. And I could subject it of your quote. Attachments will come back to. And then in the email body, I could put some text to say, thank you for your quote today. In just the email body. Okay, so you can see we can kind of, so you can see we can kind of configure these, oh gosh, sorry, give me a quick sec just while I didn't think of this one down, give me a sec. Okay, all right, okay, I'll come back to that. So we can then basically email the customer out to sort of say, thanks for your quote. I'll come back to the attachment in a sec. So as you can kind of see, we're sort of building out, a process here. Some of it may sort of feel a little bit like you need to know a bit about, you do need to know a bit about kind of the Salesforce data model a little bit to kind of really do some nice things with, passing data in and out of the different objects. But hopefully I can show you some of that in a sec. Okay,